So we will introduce our next speaker, which is Rebekka Mistereggen, who is a Norwegian independent journalist. I said independent. You are independent. And you also have a big following on social media. So they can look you up there. Would you like me to put the microphone on there?
Yes.
Yes. So welcome, Rebekka, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for letting me be the one to tell you what is really going on in Norway and what the stance is, why we are all gathered here today. And I didn't include this in my opening, but I thought it would be a great way to show with an example from yesterday. I saw that Norgesdemokratenes, Norway Democrats, party leader Geir Jacobsen, which is sitting right here, he got a question from a journalist. I'm not sure which outlet it was, maybe you're here today, I don't know, asking him what the difference between Nazi Germany and remigration is. We have a job to do, don't we? Since when was Pakistan a gas chamber? When did we stop flying to Afghanistan? Or if you saw this a couple of years ago, maybe last year, if I remember correctly, Afghanistan is inviting tourists. Yet sending them home is like Nazi Germany? Is this where we're at today? Seriously? Okay, just needed to get that out of the way before I start. I'm very thankful for the task that you have given me, my mission here today. And I come up here not only as a journalist. As you can tell, I have a front row seat to what goes on in this country, but I also grew up in one of the first multicultural housing projects in Norway in the 90s, east of Oslo. Even then, in our very small community, I think if we go to slide 2, you will get an idea of what kind of place I grew up in, what that was like. Here we go. 2013, ghetto. It's the postal code, and we were a ghetto. Our small community faced problems tied to migration. Problems that were ignored, downplayed, and outright denied. Does that sound familiar to you? Because this was already in the early 90s. And we were a community that had people from all over the world. But I remember one family in particular. We have people from Morocco, Albania, lots of people from South America, and like I said, all over the world. But this one family, very large Muslim family, we called them the Babushka family. And we named them after the Russian nesting dolls because there seemed to be an endless row of children all looking alike with a chronically pregnant mother. But it wasn't really the nickname or the fact that this family was big or they were a lot of people that was the problem. It was their behavior towards us. Because they would terrorize us in the playground. They would throw rocks at us and stir up trouble wherever they went. But back then, we used to get them back. They threw rocks, we threw rocks. And what happened then was that usually there would be an endless stream of adult cousins coming to get us, or the mother with a pan, wanting to beat some revenge into the children that was not accepting of her delightful son's violence. That was how I grew up. And despite the fact that adults would come out every now and again, this really did not have any consequences for this family. These children were free to roam as ever they would like. What did grow, however, was the protection of families that caused trouble. And it became an unspoken rule already then that they were shielded from consequence no matter what they did. And by the time I reached secondary school, this culture of protection had been institutionalized. Right next to my school, where I went to school every single day, a new institution emerged. And it was a Norwegian language program for adult newcomers from Afghanistan. I was 14 or 15 at the time, and I was living what I thought was a normal Norwegian teenager's life. But these men did not act like classmates, or normal men for that matter. They would follow the girls into the toilet, grope their breasts, and act in a way that was openly sexual harassment. That is now how you treat a 14 or 15-year-old girl, or a grown woman for that matter. What happened when we reported that, do you think? We were told by the teacher that these men, we had to understand that these men had a different culture. So they got the protection. We did not. And this has not improved with time. On the contrary. The state continues down the exact same path as those teachers once did, excusing, protecting, and concealing. In 2009, Hanne Kristin Rode, she was then the head of Police Department's Violent and Sexual Crime Unit, told NRK, our state channel, I think you're here today, welcome, something that should have shocked the entire nation. In the past 3 years, 2006, 7, 8, or 2007 to 9, every single reported stranger rape in Oslo had been committed by immigrants with a non-Western background. Every single one. I think let's have her quote up here. The perpetrators are relatively young men who come from other countries. They're often asylum seekers and often come from traumatized countries or from countries with a completely different view of women than we have in Norway. And this was not an isolated statistic. The Oslo Police Rape Report from 2007 found that 72.8% of all rape suspects that year had a background from outside of Norway. Same 2004, the figure was 63.2%. And these numbers cover all rapes. And for stranger rapes, that being attacked rapes, you know when you go through the park at night, you just want to go home from that glass of wine that you have with your friend, you do a shortcut through the park, and you come out the other side traumatized with your soul ripped out of your body because somebody felt a little bit horny, because that's also what they say sometimes to the press or police. So these attack rapes are consistently higher. They still go on today, by the way, but we never hear about it. Looking into stranger rapes or attack rapes in Oslo, every single year they happen. Do the police let you know that there's a rapist on the loose? No, that's inconvenient. Statistics from earlier years showed a clear trend that persons with a foreign background were increasingly overrepresented among rapists or rape suspects, far beyond their share of Oslo's population. And it's not just sexual crimes. When the Progressive Party requested data on the youth crime in Oslo, the numbers revealed that children of immigrants were significantly overrepresented in the city's crime stats. And this pattern was visible decades ago, and is only grown sharper with time because they have been protected. According to the report from December 2024, the overrepresentation of immigrants in violent crime remains staggering. In Oslo, among men aged 15 to 24, ethnic Norwegians face 32 charges per 1,000. That's for violence and maltreatment. For Somali men, in that same age group, The figure is 483 per thousand. That is 15 times higher. That means, statistically, that young Somali men in Oslo are charged with violent offenses more than twice a person on average. Twice a person on average. This is not diversity, okay? This is the dismantling of public safety. That is what we're witnessing. And that is a direct result of political decisions. And sometimes these decisions have fatal consequences. I think we can jump 2 slides. This is Håvard Pedersen. He was 18 years old. And I'm gonna try not to cry. I'm very pregnant, so excuse me if I tear up a little bit. He was a student with his whole life in front of him. He went to work that day in July 2018. A perfectly ordinary thing for him to do. He was helping customers at the local Coop store in Vadsø. He never returned home. Without warning, a 17-year-old asylum seeker from Afghanistan attacked him and slit his throat. There was no known connection between them, no conflict, no provocation. Just a young man of 18 working towards his future. Murdered in cold blood by somebody that should have never been in Norway to begin with. We can move on to the next slide. This is Marianne Haugen. She was 54 years old, a devoted mother, and a respected healthcare worker. On the evening of July 14, 2020, she drove to Sarpsborg bus terminal to pick up her daughter. Perfectly normal thing to do, you would think. She was sitting in her car waiting when she was brutally stabbed by a man with a migrant background. Moments later, her daughter arrived to find her mother bleeding to death in the front seat. The same man went on to stab 2 other women. One was critically injured. The other one was let off with lighter wounds. That's 2 lives lost. But it's not only murder. On a cold January night in 2024, a high school graduation party in Nordfjord had a horrific incident take place. 3 men lured a 17-year-old girl, heavily intoxicated, into their car. They drove her to a nearby field where the 3 of them sexually assaulted her and humiliated her. They held her head down and demanded that she would call him daddy. Then they videoed her, raped her, and assaulted her, and left her on the wet ice to fend for herself. The 3 men, as you can see on the screen here, was by the media classified as Nordfjordinger. You know, kind of like that Welsh boy from Rwanda. Like that Southport child slaughterer. These rapists, they're not local at all. Neither were the 4 men that were called Northerners after raping a mom at the bus stop in the northern part of Norway. They were all immigrants from faraway lands. The latter Afghanistan, the 3 so-called Nordfjordings, they were from Somalia, and one had an Arab background. And despite ruining this 17-year-old girl's life while fist bumping and laughing in court, being very proud of what they did, their only concern was their football careers once their identities were known by the media. no remorse, no empathy. And there are many of these cases. And I think it's important that we remember that these are people. They're not just statistics. These are people. Håvard and Marianne, they were living their lives, harming no one, and they were killed by individuals who were in Norway only because our politicians allowed them to be there, to be here. And for what? What possible justification is there to sacrifice the safety of ordinary Norwegians on the altar of what we know and we already knew was a failed multicultural experiment? What justification is there? There's an echoing question of memory here, of whose names we are allowed to remember. Every single year, every year, Norway honors Benjamin Hermansen. He was a young boy of mixed Norwegian African heritage, murdered in 2001 by neo-Nazis. He has a statue, as you can see in the background here. He has a statue, and his name is etched into our national consciousness. School children learn his story, and he is remembered as a symbol. Where are the statues for Håvard Pedersen or for Marianne Haugen? For the dozens of other Norwegians murdered by migrants in the last 3 decades? Do they have a statue? Is there a day of remembrance for them? No, there isn't. They exist only as entries in crime statistics, forgotten by the media, ignored by politicians, and they're erased from public conversations. The message here is clear. Some lives are remembered, mourned, and used as moral lessons, while others are discarded as inconvenient truths. Migrants, immigrants, are heavily overrepresented among murderers. 37% of all murders between 2011 and 2021 were committed by foreigners. 37%. The list of Norwegians who have lost their lives at the hands of migrants is long. It's about 100 Norwegians since the 80s, but it's just, ignored. But this is not only about the lives that are already lost. This is also about the lives that currently hang in the balance. Today, Norway has 1,200 active criminal gang members. 70 criminal networks has been identified in this country. In the past year alone, Norwegian police have prevented 10 contract killings. 10 planned executions, just in time. God knows how many terror attacks they have prevented. We know there have been some. At Arendalsuka, police chiefs from both Norway and from Sweden, they came together and described the same pictures. Gang leaders operating from abroad, Turkey, Morocco, Pakistan, pulling the strings, while our streets bear the consequences. And they admitted what politicians have refused to say out loud, and that is that this is a direct result of deliberate, harmful immigration policy. And unless drastic measures are taken now, this problem will destroy our society from within. While all this unfolds, something else is also slipping away. It's not just about safety, it's not just lives, but it's culture, freedom. It is the sense of what Norway is, what defines Norway. I can walk the streets of Oslo. It is the capital of my country that I can go to and walk the streets. And I can go there and not recognize myself in the faces that fill the sidewalks. We're all told that everyone must be seen, everyone must be represented. You see this in commercials, you see this everywhere. They mix and match and everybody should recognize themselves in something, right? Well, I don't recognize myself in my own capital. And this isn't just about policies gone wrong, this is about a fundamental fracture in what it means to be Norwegian. It's not just about the individuals, it's also about the culture. It's about the Norway that welcomed us, that shaped us, that we recognize. And it's slipping away. And no amount of forced inclusivity can fill that void. I don't feel represented by our politicians in Parliament. Hopefully there will be a change to that this fall, we'll see. Nor do I feel at home in my own country a lot of the time. And I guess that makes me a racist, according to today's European standard of what a racist is, despite the proof that institutions discriminate against people like me, and like a lot of you that I see here today. It is a double standard in our nation. Now we all talk about two-tier policing in the UK. Well, we have it here as well. Runar Magnussen was violently attacked outside of a shop in Vikersund, and at first the police didn't even want to investigate the incident of this immigrant gang that was terrorizing the community until the media forced their hand. And when locals tried to organize a peaceful march against violence, they were branded racist and threats were made, so they had to cancel. That same night, the local church was defaced with graffiti reading "Kill Whites" and KKK. And the police classified this right here, which in my opinion, if you wrote that on somebody else's, holy building in terms of another color, that might have been accusations of incitement for genocide, but what do I know? This was vandalism. It was investigated as vandalism. There was no arrests, there were no political speech, and there was no media outrage. It was mentioned. There was no outrage. And if we contrast that with Hamza Ali, which I'm sure a lot of you know the story. He was he was 25, I don't know how old he is now, but in Bergen. And he claimed that he'd been ambushed by neo-Nazis laying in wait all night in bushes in a park. That seems likely. And that he got beaten by these neo-Nazis. And his story set off a wave of sympathy. Tens of thousands of kroners were collected in donations. There was a parade. There was a protest. And the municipal politicians pledged to combat racism. Problem was, it was a lie. He was later charged with making a false statement, and when the truth emerged, the outrage just evaporated. The same media that has splashed his name all across headlines quietly replaced it with "man aged 25. How convenient that is. And his donations stayed in his account, and his political allies said nothing. The message is unmistakable. If you're Norwegian and attacked, your pain is downplayed, your attackers are excused, and your community will be silent. But if you fit the narrative, you're rewarded, even if your story is a lie. Fiction is the excuses we are delivered on a regular basis, that be socioeconomic hardship, overcrowded housing, or child poverty rhetoric. An argument for crime and immigration problems that we see a lot here in Norway. We saw it in the past in Sweden. It's always the overcrowding, it's the socioeconomics that makes crime surge as if I grew up poor and I didn't turn into a criminal, but I'm no freak of nature either. But that's what we're told. But the real problem is politicians who open the door to the third world on our expense while discriminating against us and spoon-feeding unlimited resources to immigrants. Meanwhile, our own people are lining up to the poorhouse. They're in pain waiting for the help in the healthcare system, while our political leaders, so-called, are out there saving the world. As of August 2025, Norway brought in 28 patients and 72 companions from Gaza, because we all need 7 people in the room with us when we're going to a hospital, right? They came over for treatment while Norwegian taxpayers wait months and even years to get their operation. And despite what our politicians repeat endlessly, these are the same excuses, like I said, that turned Sweden into Europe's rape capital. Sweden has cities where more than half of the population are immigrants. Norway is one of the richest and most generous countries in the world. Yet, while our people suffer under the current Labour government and the previous governments that facilitated and obediently implemented EU directives that eroded the proud social democratic nation Norway once was, we spend billions of kroners, billions, on lifting migrants from MENA countries. We even found terrorists. Despite the fact that they threaten, assault, and terrorize us. And if we object, we are far right or racist. In 2024 alone, 2.8 billion Norwegian kroners was sent abroad out of Norway by private individuals. Somalis sent 362 million Norwegian kroners to Somalia. 362 million. That's about 8,300 per person. Afghans sent 353 million Norwegian kroners to Afghanistan, averaging about 14,000 per person, more than any other group, but there's also large sums sent to Eritrea, Pakistan, Iraq, and so forth. And still, we are told that the problem is child poverty in these areas. Child poverty. 2.8 billion Norwegian kroners, taxpayer money, funded families through our welfare system sent out of our country. Socioeconomic hardship is not the problem. Overcrowding is not the problem. Child poverty is not the problem. The problem is hybris, a global welfare state in which we all pay for. We pay for that. It's our money. And this is mixed with a culture of takers and the political class willingness to impose it on us without our consent. And the worst of all, guys, is the audacity they have to tell you that you are a wicked extremist if you say, "I've had enough." The political left excels at weaponizing Norway's greatest trauma for political gain. Should you get close to making them a little bit annoyed, if you criticize jihadists, migrants, or the everyday terror that these people bring, they will invoke Anders Behring Breivik. And they will do that to silence you. A deranged man who himself drew inspiration from jihadists. He plagiarized other people's Islam critics, fueled himself on licorice candy to invoke combat morale, and he wanted to inspire other people to do the same. And then he mused about becoming the king of Norway. He thought he could if he castrated himself. As if his madness justifies the further violence towards our people. And there's the fact they never mention. And that is that the Norwegians' murder by immigrants now exceeds the death toll of his massacre, which claimed both Norwegian lives and immigrant lives at a youth summer camp in 2011. And as a journalist who has witnessed Breivik in a court of law with my own eyes, I can assure you that whatever motive they use to silence the opposition using his name is invalid. He is raving crazy. And still after 14 years of isolation, he still thinks he has a direct line, as if he ever did, to Iran and China. And he actually tries, when he goes to court, to negotiate with the judge about his future political career. He's a mass murderer. He thinks he's going to get out and have a political career, and that he can be a diplomat in Iran. This is their weaponization against you. I know that Norway is not alone in this nightmare that I just laid out for you today. I know that this is the reality for most Western countries. And I also know that more and more people are waking up to this nightmare. I would say unfortunately, but fortunately. And you can see it in the polls across Europe. You see it in Alternative for Deutschland in Germany. They're leading the polls. You see it with Marine Le Pen getting ahead in France. And you see it with Giorgia Meloni being elected in Italy or even Poland. It's all across Europe. Even Sweden, who Norway is constantly competing with for the title of humanitarian superpower, I don't know why we started that competition, but that's the thing, has an immigrant, they're critical to immigrant governments, and they have begun to send immigrants home. So the tides have turned, and that is exactly why the political class is clawing for control and pushing for censorship laws like the Digital Service Act or Public Safety Initiative, which is an insult to every adult person, every grown man or woman whose children has been raped or murdered on the streets of their country. Think that Public Safety Initiative is gonna stop Pakistani rape jihadists? I don't think so, but okay. It's an insult to every awake person, not woke, no, awake person. And I think I'm gonna end this with saying that it's time to stand firm. It's time to speak the truth that they fear the most, and to never again allow ourselves to be silenced into watching our nations die quietly. It is time for a political change, and people, it is time for remigration. Thank you.